The story of the flight through the Red Sea is heavy with language about things being heavy. Hi everyone, welcome to Wordplay and the Word. This is R.A. Sweeney. I'm here to talk to you about just interesting, weird, silly, funny, interesting wordplays that we find in the Bible and just some of the connections that are built that might get lost in translation from the Hebrew or Aramaic or Greek or between the different languages. Today, I really wanted to kind of jump back into the Exodus story with the actual Exodus, where they're leaving Egypt and they're going through the Red Sea. So kind of there around chapter 15 is kind of where we'll end up, but the few verses or a few chapters leading up to that as well, and kind of the culmination of the whole story of Exodus up to this point. And the thing that I wanted to point out is there's a funny and just huge wordplay that we see with the Hebrew word kavod. And it's conjugated a lot of different ways, but the root is kavod, which at its like real basic meaning, it means heavy. But it can also mean like significance. It can mean glory. It can mean a whole bunch of different things. But heavy is kind of like the basic meaning, and then it gets used a bit metaphorically or extrapolating from that heavy idea in a few different ways. So really we see this throughout the whole book of Exodus that that Pharaoh has a heavy heart. And there's a lot of commentary on exactly what that means, whether it is, he's like puffed himself up to be like, he's given his heart so much glory. He's glorified himself in his heart. There are ideas from Egyptian mythology about weighing hearts, and his heart being heavy means that it's wicked. There's a lot of different ways people have interpreted that. But I mean, altogether, like we've got this picture of the stone-hearted Pharaoh who, because he's so proud, refuses to let the Israelites go and ends up destroying Egypt through not letting him go and bringing the plagues on himself, and just disaster coming from this. But it says throughout the story that he made his heart heavy, and it's this word kavod. And then when we actually get to the Exodus, God is telling Moses that he is going to make himself kavod. And here I think it's meant to really juxtapose, like, Pharaoh thought he was glorifying himself, but really he was like piling on his own guilt and iniquity, and just puffed himself up with pride, trying to glorify himself. And I'm going to actually show him what glory looks like when I glorify myself. I'm going to display my significance and my glory in front of this guy who thinks he has glory. And so it's that same word, kavod. So you think that you have kavod, you've been kavading yourself. I'm going to kavod myself in front of you, and then you'll see what kavod really looks like. And so, the sea splits, the Israelites pass through on dry land, the Egyptians, they get into the middle of the sea and they get thrown into a confusion. And it talks about the wheels of the chariots. And depending on your translation, it could be a lot of different things. Maybe they're sinking in, maybe something weird's going on with them that they're not driving straight, or he's like confusing them. Lots of different ways it gets translated. But it's literally, they're heavy. So the wheels of the chariot are that same word, kavod. And here they're like bogging down. Maybe they're sinking into, maybe the land was dry on top, but they broke through like a crust into more of a mud. Or maybe it's just heavy as in cumbersome. They weren't working right. They were, lots of different ways that could be used metaphorically. But you think you're kavod, I'm going to show you kavod. And oh, by the way, the wheels of your chariot are now kavod. And so we've got all this kavod language. And then to set kavod aside for just 1 second, along with that idea of the chariot's wheels becoming heavy, there's another really silly wordplay in there, where it says that the Egyptians were attempting to flee. They were fleeing from the middle of the Red Sea is what they're trying to do. And that's normally how it gets translated, that they're fleeing. And it's a very common word for flee, but it literally means to vanish away. which if I were to flee, I'm trying to make myself vanish. So I'm, disappearing from before you. But it's silly in this context. They're trying to flee and then they get swallowed up by the water and they actually do vanish. So same sort of deal where the Egyptians were trying to make themselves kavod, and God says, I'm going to show you what kavod really looks like. Here we have the same thing of like, you're trying to disappear, like get out of here. Well, I'll make you disappear underneath the waters. And so just another kind of wordplay with that. And another long-term wordplay that comes up in the middle of this story is when Moses first comes to Pharaoh and demands that Pharaoh send away the Israelites. Pharaoh's first response is, who is this God that you're talking about? I don't know anybody by that name, the name that you're giving me. I don't know him. Who is he? Why should I know who this guy is? Why should I listen to him? I don't know anything about him. So he's kind of like trying to demean God, whether he means to or not. Like he is trying to disparage this guy. Like he's not important to me. I'm way more significant, and he's not important enough to register on my radar. And here in the middle of this story, it talks about God, getting rid of Egypt, removing them from being like taskmasters and overlords over the Israelites. But the word that gets used is, it describes it like an animal like shaking its head to like flick a bug off of it. So, and specifically it says a mane. I don't know why it would need to be a lion specifically, and I don't know what other animals have manes, but, shaking a bug out of your mane is the verb that gets used there, which I think the idea, like translating it as just like he shook them off. Yeah, that's what happened. But I loved that extra detail because it's like you made yourself this. You tried to make yourself so much more significant than God that you don't even need to listen to him. When he completely destroys all of Egypt and all of your army, and the word for army that gets used is actually like power or strength or might. It's not the army of Pharaoh, it's the might of Pharaoh that gets drowned in the Red Sea. And it says that God just shook him off like a cat just lazily shaking its head and flicking off a bug. Like that's how insignificant Egypt is before God, when they were trying to say that God was that insignificant to them. And then all of this comes back together at the very end when they get drowned in the sea. It says that, and here very much a metaphor, because we know like when the seas crash down, they're already on the sea floor, but it says that they sank down into the depthless abyss like a stone. And so Pharaoh has been hardening his heart. He's been making his heart stone-like. He's been making his heart heavy. There's all this idea of like the heavy, stony sort of heart. And finally, when they chase him into the sea and God brings the final judgment, it's those heavy hearts that are sinking them down into the bottom of the sea, just like a stone heart would make you sink down. So a lot of just interesting and telling wordplay. It's really bringing a lot of the story up to this point to a head of, who actually does have significance and heaviness and glory, and, the idea of who is God, let me show you. And all of those things together really just kind of come to a head here in a really interesting way. So that's what I have for this week. I hope it was a blessing. If you are enjoying these, make sure you subscribe so you catch our weekly wordplay videos. Be liking videos so other people can find these a little bit easier, and we can share a little bit more clarity and understanding of God's word with others. If you know other people that would enjoy these, please be sharing with them as well. But for now, thank you all for watching. I really appreciate you guys being here, and we will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.